Thank you, brother. Your prayer is always touching our hearts. Praise the Lord.
Well, our topic tonight is the millennium, and so it is a bit of a positive topic. You know, on this earth we have so many troubles and people being sick and so forth, but we look forward to a time where there will be a new heaven and a new earth, right?
Amen.
Where there will no longer be sorrows like this. So, the millennium. It's a confusing topic to a lot of people. But it's actually fairly simple when you realize the way it works. And there's all kinds of different theories on this topic. And people may wonder, why is it important? It actually reveals a bit of the character of God, as everything in the Bible does. Now, you probably heard some of the different theories. Have you guys heard of the ideas of, on the secret rapture, there's all these different ideas of pre-trib, post-trib, and mid-trib. Have you heard those terms before?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the idea of when is the rapture going to be? Is it pre-tribulation, post-tribulation, after, all these different ideas. And we looked at the idea, and we saw that the secret rapture is not a biblical concept when we studied the second coming. But it ties in with this idea of the millennium, because a lot of people believe that the millennium is going to be this reign on earth of God basically conquering the world's kingdoms on this earth, kind of the way it is today, except, with problems that we still have today, so it's not perfect, but God's in charge somehow. And it's kind of this almost heaven, but not quite thing. And I'm not sure where people get these ideas from, because when you read it in the Bible, it's not biblical at all. Some of it comes from a misunderstanding of Israel, and thinking that all the prophecies in the Old Testament of Israel need to be fulfilled, and so there needs to be this reign of Israel somehow on this earth. But we saw, when we studied who is Israel, who the real Israel is, right? Do you guys remember that?
Yeah.
It is the church. And so these prophecies are bigger than just this sinful world. God wants perfection. He wants the world to be recreated, not just reign on this sinful world. Okay, so let's look at the millennium. And this kind of piggybacks on the topic we studied a few weeks ago on the second coming. So hopefully you guys remember that one, because I'm going to be jogging your memory a little bit on that, because we're going to build on some of those concepts. The millennium. What does the millennium mean, first of all? What do you guys...
1,000 years.
It means 1,000 years. The 1,000 years. Okay. And it's very interesting. If you study Bible chronology, you can go through and you can add up all the dates of everyone, all the patriarchs in the Bible, right? How long they lived, and when they had their kids, and how long that kid lived, and when he had his child, and how long that child lived. And you can add them all up together, and you can get an estimate of about how old the earth is from the Bible. I believe it's called Bishop's chronology. The guy, is that right? Bishop's chronology?
Bishop's, yeah. But it's last name, I forgot last name.
Yeah, Bishop something. But it's commonly termed as Bishop's chronology, right?
Yeah.
So you can look it up. And the date is, they believe that the earth, according to the Bible, now it's not exact because there's just a few of the patriarchs that it doesn't tell you when exactly they had their kids or when they were born compared to their father. So it gives a little bit of leeway. But it's about that the earth creation would have been at about 4,000 BC. And that would be how long ago from now? From today?
6,000.
About 6,000 years ago. That creation is about 6,000 years ago. And those who believe in evolution would scoff at that idea right away and mock that idea. But I do believe that's about right. That's about accurate. Now, when you look at this, and just kind of forget this 4,000 BC number, but if you look at the idea that the earth is about 6,000 years old, and you look at the idea that there's a coming millennium, Do you notice anything about those two numbers?
7,000.
The two together brings you to
7,000.
7,000, huh? Right? You get 6,000 years of sin and all the trouble we have on this earth, and God is working out the plan of salvation, right? And then 1,000 year, almost like 1,000-year Sabbath. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
By the way, that was Bishop Usher.
Bishop Usher?
Usher.
Usher's chronology, that's
Yeah.
what it's called.
He was
Yeah,
the
you guys can look that up.
Bishop of Church of Ireland.
Usher's chronology. It's just named after him because he went and added the dates up.
Yeah.
Yeah, added the ages of the, yeah. Usher's chronology.
Actually, Usher is a name? Of
That's
Yeah.
the
That's
name.
the
Yeah,
name.
yeah. So, I think
James.
that's interesting, right?
James, yeah.
6,000 years working on this earth
Mm-hmm.
with all this sin problem, and then 1,000 years
The
rest.
1,000 years is sabbatical years. for
Like
this
a
earth.
Sabbath, 1,000 years, exactly. Keep that in mind as we go along. Okay, so going back into what we discussed when we looked at the second coming. Remember that there are two resurrections. And when does the first resurrection happen?
Oh, when Jesus
Yeah.
comes.
The beginning.
When Jesus comes, right?
Yeah.
Let's look at that. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, starting in verse 15. 1 Thessalonians 4, 15 through about 17, 18. And it's speaking about the dead, and these are words that are often read at funerals, reminding people that there will be a resurrection, and to comfort people with these words. But it says here, "For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord," so at the second coming, those who are alive, who are Christians, we who are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord, shall not prevent, that's the old King James wording there. Does anyone have a different word?
Precede.
Proceed.
Precede, that's what it means. We won't go ahead of.
Ahead of them, yeah.
Yeah, we won't precede or go ahead of them which are asleep.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to be asleep?
Dead.
Those who are dead, right?
They're not
Those who
in
are
heaven.
rested in the Lord.
They're not in heaven, they're sleeping.
They're sleeping, right?
Yeah.
So those who are alive and remain until the second coming won't go before those who are already asleep. Then he says this in verse 16, "For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first.
Yeah.
Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. So shall we ever be with the Lord." So,
Amen.
when is the first resurrection?
At the coming of Jesus.
At the second coming, right?
Yeah.
That is the easy way
The coming of
to
the Lord.
mark that event, the first resurrection. At some point, there is a second resurrection. And we'll talk about when that is in a second. But the first one happens at the second coming. Can you all see this all right?
Yes.
Hopefully my chicken scratch isn't that bad. You get the idea. Decided to do this the old-fashioned way without the slides. Okay, so there's two resurrections. Let's prove that there's two resurrections. We've identified where the first one is. Let's look at the second one in Revelation chapter 20. This is the Millennium chapter. Revelation chapter 20. This is the chapter that focuses most on the subject of the 1,000 years. So there's two resurrections. That's what we want to prove. And we've shown that the first one happens at the second coming of Christ. Okay, let's see here. Verse 4, there's some interesting language here. I want you to notice mostly at the end of it, but I'll read the whole verse. "And I saw thrones, and they that sat on them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which worshipped not the beast, nor the image, neither received his mark in the right hand or in the forehead. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years." Now, these are people who are martyrs, right? It says they were beheaded. They refused to take the image of the beast, the mark of the beast, right? But it says they lived. So this would obviously be a resurrection, right? They lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. Verse 5, "But the rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years were finished. Now, question, if the martyrs and the ones who were God's people were the ones who lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years, and the rest of the dead did not live until the end of the 1,000 years, who would be the rest? If God's people, the martyrs, were the ones who lived during the 1,000 years, who's the rest? The lost.
Yeah.
The lost.
Yeah.
That would be the lost, right?
Mhm.
And then notice this. So the righteous are the ones who were raised at the beginning, right? This is at the second coming. This is the first resurrection. And we include there martyrs, those who are beheaded for the sake of the gospel, right? It describes them. And then the rest of the dead would be, here's the rest, the wicked, the lost. And then it says at the end of verse 5, this is the first resurrection, verse 6, blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. Clear that these are God's people, right? The first resurrection is God's people. On such the second death hath no power. Those are the people who are lost. Now, who does the second death have power on? Who does the second death harm?
The wicked.
The wicked, the lost. Exactly. So we see a distinction. They that have done good are raised at the resurrection of life, and they that have done evil, the resurrection of damnation. Question?
Now, would that also be of those who do not believe? Not just
Anyone?
necessarily the wicked.
That's a
but
good
for
question.
the sake of those who do not believe, they don't accept. They're still
Basically the
stiff-necked.
atheists.
They're still stiff-necked. They're not believing.
Well,
They-
doesn't
they
the
just
Bible
don't
say
believe
that
anything.
everyone will pick a side?
Yeah. It's a good question. What we're going into with that is the idea of basically what happens to people, and there's a few different categories you mentioned, but what happens to people who maybe have never heard of the gospel, right? How does that work? Or never heard it correctly, right? What about people who lived during the Dark Ages and they were given this false version of Christianity by the papacy, right?
Yes,
What happens to those people? I think, it's a bit to study right now because it's a different topic, but the short answer is I would recommend reading Romans chapter 2. And Romans 2 goes and it talks about those who don't have the law. In other words, they don't have the Bible, right? And it says that they're judged by what they know to be right or wrong. Yeah. And that's basically what Paul says. And that if those who follow what they know to be right versus right and wrong, and they live a changed life, even though they don't know God, who's the one who changed them? You can't do that by yourself.
No.
So Gentiles who don't have the law, when they keep the law, meaning what the law of love, right? That's God working in them. And everyone who ever gets to heaven will get there through the blood of Christ. But there will be some who don't know that. Think about the fact of the people who were born before Jesus lived, the Jews. Did they understand that the Messiah was going to die on the cross? Not all of them did. They didn't fully understand the Messiah was going to come and die on the cross. A lot of them thought he was going to come and just reign. They didn't understand the idea of the Messiah dying, so they didn't fully understand the gospel either. But because they believed in God, they'll be saved on credit before the Messiah came, right? We're now saved on debit, right? Because we're saved after he came, right? You get the idea? So basically, everyone is judged based on what they know, and God is fair.
Amen.
God is fair. And he
But
will.
what does it say that when Christ says, you must be born again?
What does it mean to be born again? It needs to be changed, right?
That's accepting.
So okay, let's look at the passage in Romans 2. This is a good question. And this actually does relate to the millennium in some ways, because the millennium does deal with the concept of judgment. Romans 2, and we'll try and look at this quickly, but there's a beautiful passage in, I think it's Zechariah, where it talks about Jesus, and I believe it's talking about the Lord in heaven, and it talks about how people will come to him that day and they will ask him, what are these marks in your hands?
Yeah.
And that I believe that will happen in heaven. There will be people who will come and they will say, what are these scars in your hands? And he'll have to tell them the story because they never heard it. But they are still saved through him, even though they did not understand that, because he was the one who changed their hearts. So look, here it is, Romans 2, starting in verse 12. For as many have sinned without the law shall perish without the law, and as many have sinned in the law shall be judged by the law. For not the hearers of the law are just before God, but the doers of the law shall be justified. For when the Gentiles, which do not have the law, do by nature the things contained in the law, these, having not the law, are a law unto themselves, which show the work of the law written in their hearts. Now what does that sound like? The law written in their hearts. Does that sound like another passage?
Yeah.
That sounds like Hebrews 8, where it talks about the new covenant. I will write my laws in your heart. That's conversion. That's being born again. But these people don't know that it's God who's the one who's changed them. They don't realize because they've never heard it. They've never heard the message of the gospel. So the idea is that God is not so unjust that he would say every person who doesn't even have the opportunity to ever hear the gospel, they're automatically lost. That's not how God works. In fact, Psalms tells us, in Romans, I believe it's the previous chapter, Romans 1, it says that every man knows that there's a God. Because nature itself tells you that there's a God. We know there must be a creator by simply looking at creation. And though they have twisted ideas of who God is, they know there must be a God. And so there's people, who who followed all they knew was right, and they'll get to heaven and God will have to explain to them, you had no idea what you were doing. But the gospel and the Bible gives people a clear understanding of who God is. And so you cannot just assume, oh, well, they'll find God in their own way. It's more likely that they'll be lost with these pagan religions because they don't know any, because their ideas of God are very corrupt. And so we need to preach the message everywhere. But, you keep reading what Paul says here. It's hard to come to any other conclusion. Verse 15, which show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts the means, while accusing or else excusing one another, in the day when God shall judge the secrets of men by Jesus Christ, according to my gospel. So, the idea is that God will judge people based on what they know. You're not held responsible for the things you don't know. And when the Gentiles do those things which are contained in the law without knowing what the law is, then they show the work of the law written in their hearts. That's
Makes sense.
what Paul says. They'll be saved by Christ. No man will come to the Father except through him. They don't know it. Their sins have to be forgiven somehow, but it's through Christ. It's hard to explain this because.
Well, what your point is saying about people in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Like, for example,
Did they ever call on the name of Jesus?
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't even know the name existed, right? But they knew God's going to save them somehow. But they didn't know the story of the cross, Yeah, I think that's a good way to understand it.
Especially you were talking about, what you're talking about is, Zechariah 13:6.
Oh, okay, yeah. You want to read it?
Very good. It says, and one shall say unto him, what are these wounds between your hands? Then he shall answer, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends.
I think that's beautiful. I think that's beautiful. They will ask
Friends.
him. They'll ask him, what are these wounds? They don't know the story.
Yeah.
And they'll be told. Because what matters is, has your heart been changed or not? That's what matters. Has God changed your heart or not?
Yeah.
Even if you didn't even realize that it was God changing your heart. A child may die before they fully understand the gospel, and yet God worked on their heart. And so.
But we have these people today.
Mhm.
Today, we have radio, we have everything under the world. There is
Yeah.
no reason
No, I
why
agree.
nobody in the world right now does not know
Mm.
God or have a chance to come to him. And so many people are so stiff-necked. just
No,
like
I
it is.
agree.
They are rebellious, they are
I agree.
consistently
Yes.
saying, I don't care, I don't believe this.
Yeah, yeah,
Boom.
absolutely.
Those are
That's
the
different,
atheists.
that's different.
Yeah.
Not just atheists,
Yeah.
honey.
Well, there
Yeah.
are people who have heard the law or
Yeah.
heard the word of God and about
And reject it.
or
And there's
salvation
also,
and
like
they
you said,
rejected it.
there's also people who have the opportunity
Oh,
and don't want to know.
this is
right?
it.
You know, they have a Bible or they know somebody who knows the Bible and they're not interested to look into it. God's not going to force anyone to come to heaven
They
who
just-
doesn't want to know.
That's right, there's no choice.
And so he's not going to force them. Yeah, so to answer your original question, what about the atheists and those that are yeah, they're lost. Yeah, the ones who refuse to let God, yeah, absolutely.
That was it, I think that was where I was trying to.
Yeah.
To
And
lead.
and by the time we get to the end of time, the issues will be worldwide. You'll either be on one side or the other. So at the end of time, because all the fake miracles and the mark of the beast issue, everyone will believe in God.
At that
But the
point.
majority will believe they are following God and they'll do it in the wrong way,
Mhm.
right? And they'll do it in the way of the broad road.
They want.
And then a very small group will
Yeah.
follow what the Bible says.
Yeah, Cain came to worship God.
Yeah,
He did,
yeah.
his own
Mhm.
way,
He offered sacrifice his own way.
his own way.
Good question, good question. Hopefully that answered it somewhat. It's
I-
hard.
I'm still, you know, I'm a firm believer that we as Christians must repent.
No, I agree, yeah.
Repent and be saved, as
Absolutely.
far as being reborn again of the Spirit.
No, I hear you,
You know,
absolutely.
we're born
Absolutely.
of water, and then we are born of the Spirit
I-
of God, who now
absolutely.
comes to live within us.
Absolutely,
You know, that
absolutely, yeah.
is, and.
I know, I agree,
I think
I
that's
agree,
further down the
I
line
agree,
here.
I agree, I agree, absolutely.
So
Okay.
basically, those who really, I think, those who really know already the truth, or maybe, you know, they heard about Jesus Christ, and they still don't believe, and they are stiff-necked, that they sin.
Yeah,
Because in
absolutely.
James 5:17, it says that,
He who knows to do good. does
therefore
it
to
not.
him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin.
Yeah,
So you know already it's true, and still you're still stiff-necked, and you still don't follow, then
That's right.
you will be lost.
yeah, absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and the Bible,
Paul
No
says-
excuse for it.
and the
No
Bible,
excuse not
yeah,
to.
the Bible
Yeah.
says it'll be worse for those who heard the
Yeah,
gospel and
absolutely.
rejected
Yes.
it.
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
right.
yeah. And Paul says, you know, that at the times of this ignorance, God winked, so he understands when he judges us on what we know. Anyway, it's good stuff. Okay. So the idea is that the first resurrection is the righteous, and it happens at the second coming. The second resurrection, going back to Revelation chapter 20, the rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years were finished. So here's the second resurrection. And this is at the end of the 1,000 years, and this is the wicked, the lost. So in between these two resurrections, we have the 1,000 years. That's how you bookend the 1,000 years. Two resurrections, right? And you remember Jesus talks about the two resurrections. You know, they that have done good unto the resurrection of life, and they that have done evil unto the resurrection of damnation. So there's two resurrections separated by the 1,000 years. Okay, interesting, right?
Yeah.
Now, remember, when we looked at the second coming, that what is the earth like after the second coming happens? Remember, when Jesus comes, those who are alive, who are Christians, according to what we just read in 1 Thessalonians, they are changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're made immortal. Those who are dead, who are Christians, who are believers, could be Old Testament Jews, we don't know, but they are resurrected.
Mm-hmm.
Resurrected.
Well, this still changed.
Yes.
Yes.
Of
Yes.
course.
So here we have all the righteous are brought to life at the second coming. And the wicked, who are alive at the second coming, what happens to them?
They'll die.
They're killed by the brightness of his coming. Remember that?
Yes.
Mhm.
So the wicked are all killed when he returns. Remember we read the parable in Matthew 13 of the wheat and the tares?
Yes.
Remember that?
Yes.
And he says, you want me to pull the tares up? He said, no, not until the harvest. At the harvest, then gather up all the tares, burn them, and take the wheat and take it into my barn. Right? And so the tares are all the wicked, and they are killed. So all the wicked
Killed.
are killed.
That's the first step, right?
Yes.
That's their first death. Those who are alive at the second coming, they're killed at the second coming. What about the wicked who are already dead at the second coming? They just stay dead.
Stay dead.
They just stay dead until
The second
resurrection. So if all of the righteous have been resurrected and changed, and they're all taken up to heaven, right? All the righteous are, horrible handwriting, forgive me. All the righteous have been taken up to heaven. All the wicked are either dead or left dead. Who is on the earth?
Only Satan.
The demons, that's it. That's all you have left. All the angels have come with Jesus and the welcoming party to get the saints, taking them back to heaven. They're all there. The wicked have been killed. There's no one left on the earth.
No one will
except
bury
for
them.
The demon. No one's there to bury them. In fact, yeah, that's true. The Old Testament says there's nobody buries them. Yeah.
Joshua,
Because there's no one there.
I'm
Go
gonna
ahead.
thank you for this explanation because
Mhm.
I used to say, oh God, when is this gonna end? But I'm realizing that I need to pray more for my kids that I love and want them to be with me and my husband. So
Amen.
thank you very much.
Amen.
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 Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
Yes.
You know, we definitely got to keep praying for our families.
Amen. Wow.
So,
It's so real.
there's no one left
That's right.
on this earth during the 1,000 years
No living thing, no animals alive,
except for
only the demons.
The
The demons.
demons.
Under the king, under the god.
they're the only ones here on this planet and a bunch of dead bodies
Mm-hmm.
and destroyed
Yeah.
cities.
That's
No more world.
scary kind
It's
of.
so dark.
Yeah.
That is a really torture.
Now let's look at this. Let's look at this concept. Okay, so let's read the beginning of Revelation chapter 20 now. We're going to back up, read the first couple verses. And I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit. The word there in Greek is abyssos. Abyssos.
Abyss.
It's where we get the English word abyss. That's the Greek word there. Abyssos. It's translated here as bottomless pit. And a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. So Satan is bound during this 1,000 years. And he cast him into the abyssos, the bottomless pit, and shut him up and set a seal upon him that he should, notice this, he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. After that he must be loosed a little season. Now notice this, it says that he's bound and shut up with a chain. Why? What is the purpose why? That he should what? That he won't deceive the nations. Why do you think he can't deceive the nations during the 1,000 years?
Because everyone else will be dead.
No one.
Because there's no one there.
There are no
I was gonna say.
Common sense, right? They're all dead or
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
All the saints are gone. All the wicked are dead. So he can. So when people read this, they think of this idea of this. You know, when I hear the word bottomless pit, my mind immediately goes to a well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A well, you just can't see the bottom, right?
Yeah.
And they think this is literal, that Satan's thrown into this pit and put a chain on him. But this language is all symbolic. He's described as the serpent, the dragon. He's not literally a serpent or a dragon. You know,
He's
this
a
is
demon.
symbolic language. And I don't believe it's real physical
Yeah.
change. Satan's a spirit. You know, he's an angel.
He's not
bound
needed to
on-
chain or anything because nowhere he can go.
He's just on this planet, and there's no one there. He's bound by the circumstances.
So that is his jail.
That is his jail.
That's why he's bound.
Is this earth. He's here on this earth with nothing done. No, but it says abusos. It says bottomless pit. What does that mean? Let's explain this. This is very interesting.
Yeah.
Go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 1.
Yes.
Yep.
This
the
is
word.
very interesting here. The Greek word again is abusos. Now, you know that there is a Greek Old Testament, right? It's called the Septuagint. It was written a couple hundred years before Jesus was born, and it's often quoted by the New Testament. It's a very good Greek translation of the Old Testament. And it's interesting to see when that Greek word abusos is used in the Old Testament, when they translated the Old Testament. So, Genesis 1, starting in verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void. Guess what the Greek word there is?
Abusos.
Abusos. That's the Greek word that the Septuagint uses to translate the Hebrew word for without form and void. It simply means something that's desolate. And that's what this earth was before God created on it. Apparently just some planet, some rock that he had made at some point, and he came to it and then created life on it. But it was empty, completely empty, without form and void. The Greek word used in Septuagint is abusos.
The black hole.
Yeah, right? Yeah, I mean, you can imagine
Yeah.
if this earth was just destroyed, all the cities destroyed, it's just a desolate wasteland without form and void. That's a good way to describe it, right? You know, and that's what it was. No life at all. No life at all. Everything, not even any green grass when God came here first. Nothing existed. So the word there for without form, void, that's abusos. That's abusos.
So in the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. In Genesis, he was able to create.
Yes.
But here it's the demon who is left in the voidness of the earth, and he can do anything.
He can't create nothing. The demons can't create nothing. Nope. They are stuck with an empty planet because they do not have the power to create. Nope.
Yeah.
I just think they look at each other or argue or fighting. Maybe his followers, the evil angels, now is realized what the Satan, the promises.
We'll get into that because there's some punishment involved here by being stuck on this empty planet. Yeah, that's a good point. We'll get into that in a second.
You want to go into the chain?
No, I'm not going to. I'm not going to.
No,
Listen.
we'll take a Peter then.
No. Yeah. So let's go to Jeremiah 4. I got a lot to cover here. It's 7:50.
This is great. Boy.
Jeremiah
This is
4.
great.
This is really good.
Starting in verse 23. And we're going to see the same language. Now, Jeremiah here is discussing the idea of the, when Jeremiah 4, 23. He's discussing the idea of when Israel is destroyed. And he jumps from describing the destruction of Israel to describing the destruction at the end of the world. Jeremiah 4, verse 23. I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
That sounds exactly like it was in Genesis 1, before the earth was created on, right? And the heavens, and they had no light.
Jeremiah chapter 4.
Starting in verse 23. I beheld the mountains, and lo, they trembled, and all the hills moved lightly. I beheld, lo, there was no man. And all the birds of the heavens were fled. I beheld, and lo, the fruitful place, so the nice, beautiful, green, lush places, was a wilderness, desolate. And all the cities thereof were broken down at the presence of the Lord and by his fierce anger. So this is after the second coming, when God destroys the wicked and destroys the world as it is today and takes his people out of it. There's no man. It's without form and void. The cities are broken down by the presence of the Lord. That's what it's going to look like after the second coming.
Here the Septuagint Bible also use the same.
The without form and void, yep, it's abusos. It's abusos, yeah. And then verse 27, for thus saith the Lord, the whole land shall be desolate. Yet I will not make a full end. The planet's still here, but it's emptied and destroyed on the surface. Why is the planet left? Because at some point he's going to recreate on this planet. There'll be a new heavens and a new earth, right? Jesus says in Matthew 5, the meek shall inherit the earth. So he's going to recreate it. Isn't it interesting that at the beginning, before God created the first time on this earth, it was without form and void, abusos. Before God recreates on this earth, it's again without form and void, abusos. Empty, destroyed. And then he recreates on it.
Right.
You see how that works? It's almost a repeat. Interesting. Okay. Now, what you were saying about the demons by themselves here, arguing, right? This is punishment for the demons for 1,000 years. The demons, for some reason, we don't fully understand why, but for some reason, the demons do not want to not be tempting somebody. Did you know that? Let's look at this. Let me prove this for you. Luke chapter 8, verse 31. This is the story of the demoniacs, I believe. And the demons, who was called Legion. Remember that?
Yeah, Legion. Yes.
Luke chapter 8. Jesus said to them, starting in verse 30, and Jesus asked them, saying, what is thy name? And he said, Legion, because many devils were entering into him. Verse 31, and they, the demons, besought him, or begged him, that he would not send them to go out into the deep. Guess what that word is?
Bosos.
Oh, busos. Don't send us out into nothingness. And then he said, and there was there a herd of many swine. Now, I used to read this when I was younger. This is such a strange story.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of swine there feeding on the mountain, and they begged him that he would suffer them to enter them. And he suffered them. He allowed them to do it. And what do? They enter into the pigs, and what do they do to the pigs?
The pigs became
They
insane.
immediately convince the pigs to kill themselves.
Yeah.
That's what demons do. Although with humans, they have to do it a little bit more carefully and trick us slowly to mess ourselves up.
But
With
they
pigs,
are animals,
just
so they
drown
can
them
just
right
drown
away.
themselves.
Right? Now, why do the demons beg to go into the pigs? For some reason, demons don't want to be not tempting someone. They want to be possessing and tempting somebody.
Well, they're originally angels, and angels are always, they're
Helping.
Yeah.
Doing something, right? And so now they've been perverted, and now all they do is they work for the devil, and they try and hurt people, right? And so you can imagine, somebody who has a guilty conscience, they want to keep busy to keep their minds off it, right? That's kind of the way I understand this, is that they would rather be tempting someone, doing something to keep their minds off of, well, their coming fate, what's coming to them, right? They don't want to think about that stuff. Now they have 1,000 years where there's nobody here, and they're left to look at what they did. The planet destroyed, nobody to tempt. And that's part of their punishment. For 1,000 years, the devil and the demons will have nobody to tempt. Interesting, right?
The devil needs the place that the human heart. So the Jesus story, they clean up the heart, the devil is left, and look for and bring
seven more. He comes
Yeah,
back, right?
comes
Yeah,
back.
it says he goes and he finds nowhere to rest, so he comes back, right? The
And
demons
more
always
demons,
want to
yeah.
be in somebody and tempting somebody.
Joshua
Just
saw,
like a snail needed to
Be in a
it's
shell.
air
Yeah.
so for the next millennium, is going to be the second resurrection, and the devils are going to be loose again.
After the millennium, it says they'll be loosed for a little season. So
Yeah.
let's go back to Revelation.
A little
Revelation
season.
chapter
A
20.
little bit.
At the end of verse
We're gonna
3.
clear that up for you.
Yeah.
Because I'm confused too.
He'll clear it.
At the end of verse 3, it says that, let's read verse 3. And cast him into the abusos, and shut him up, and set a seal on him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. After that, he should be used for a, bless you, for a little season. So there's a short amount of time after the millennium, that the wicked are resurrected. And what does the devil do immediately when the wicked are resurrected? He goes and starts tempting them and guiding them to do what he wants immediately. And so he has a little bit of time here where he gets them, and we'll see what he does with them.
But we're
And
gonna
then-
have hard times again.
We will.
We will not be
It
It won't hurt us.
in
Second
heaven.
resurrection.
If you're
You'll see. You'll see.
okay.
We'll explain. Okay. We're gonna
Yeah,
get
'cause
good question.
I used to think the same thing. I'm like,
He's not going to tempt us anymore.
Yeah.
He's
We're
going to
already
tempt
in
No,
us.
heaven.
we'll be up in heaven. This is for the
We're all in
wicked.
heaven.
Don't
Okay.
worry.
We love you.
One of the points,
So-
one of the points here, is, that I mentioned before, is that he's not going to be resurrected. He's going to just be loose a little while. In other words, he's going to be unchanged. The
Yeah,
same.
That's true. That's
He
true.
didn't die and then he now resurrected
He
again.
didn't. Yeah, he didn't die and resurrect.
The
He's
same.
No,
the same.
the
Yep.
same.
Same character.
So the devil is loosed from his prison when the wicked are resurrected, and it says he's loosed for a little season. What happens this time that he's loose? Well, the wicked are resurrected, so he has somebody to tempt. So that's the idea.
So he's
So
helping
his
again.
prison is not having anybody to tempt. That's the
Yeah.
idea. Okay. Where are the saints during this time?
We're in heaven.
In
They've been
heaven.
taken up to heaven, right? John chapter 14. John 14, verse 1 through 3. Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. That's the
Amen.
idea. So when Jesus
Amen.
comes and gets us, he takes us to heaven, right? So during the 1,000 years, God's people are in heaven. I don't know where people get the idea that somehow we're reigning on this earth. No, there's no man that's alive during this time. We're reigning with Christ, but we reign with him in heaven.
Now, that's the first resurrection.
Yes.
This is after the first resurrection. We're taken up to heaven.
Right.
We're there. The demons are on this planet all messed. The planet's messed
For
up.
1,000 years.
For 1,000 years, yeah. And now the question is, what are we doing during that 1,000 years, right? So, let's look at this. Revelation chapter 20. We're in heaven, but what are we doing? Revelation chapter 20, verse 4. We read this verse before, but now I want to read it again. Revelation chapter 20, verse 4. And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither received the mark in their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. So what are they doing during this 1,000 years? Reigning with Christ, and it
Yeah.
says they are given thrones and judgment is given to them.
Yes. We're judging.
Judgment is given to the saints. Now this is interesting. Look at this. 1 Corinthians chapter 6.
So
So
the
we
first.
need another preparation.
Yeah.
You have a question? Yeah.
We need to improve a lot. That's
Yes.
what I say.
We need to show ourselves as those who can be entrusted with judgment. Right? 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 1 through 3. Dare any of you, this is Paul, and he's speaking of the idea that there's problems in the church, and saints are taking each other to court. And he is almost mocking the idea that they would do this to each other. And the way he does it is he shows, you should have better judgment than this. Here we go. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 1 through 3. Dare any of you, having a matter against another, go to the law before the unjust courts, and not before the saints? Do you not know that the saints shall judge the world? And if the world shall be judged by you, are you unworthy to judge the smallest matters? Know ye not that we shall judge angels?
Yes.
How much more the things that pertain to this life? So according to Paul, God's people are going to judge the world and the lost angels.
Awesome.
Wow.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
Yes.
So what are we doing
So you will be
during the 1,000 years?
We're reigning.
We are reigning with Christ, so the saints, I'll put us up here. The saints judge the
angel.
wicked. And we reign
With Christ.
with Christ.
And the fallen angels, too, right?
Yeah, the wicked, which include the fallen
The
angels.
fallen angels.
Yeah, includes the fallen angels. We will judge the world and the fallen angels. Now, does this mean that we get to decide who's going to be lost and saved?
No,
No.
it's
no.
already decided.
It's already been decided because they've already been killed at the second coming, right?
Yeah.
So what are we going to be doing? Now, let's look at this. We are going to judge God's judgments. God is going to open up the books of life and show us why those who are lost are lost.
Because he's fair.
Because he's fair. And we are going to agree. It is not that we are going to decide anyone's fate. God already decides that. We are simply going to be explained why. We're going to have a lot of questions. We're going to have questions. God, how come this person is saved, right? You're going to see people in heaven and say, how did you save that person? And God's going to open the books and show us.
How can I be saved?
Yeah, right? You know? Other people maybe ask that about you and me, right? How did you save that guy, right?
Oh, you just say Melo.
And he will open the books and show them.
We talked about that
How
in
we
Sunday
all-
school class, Lord.
Yeah.
Please explain that.
Yeah, right? And all our questions need to be answered, right? Before eternity happens, and before the wicked get their final punishment, God answers all of our questions during
Or
the life.
thousand
And there won't
years.
be a question when the wicked do get their final destruction. And that whole rebellion of is God righteous, is God, he will have a whole witnesses now. Witnesses.
Yep.
We are his
We
witnesses.
will all agree.
Yeah.
Before the wicked get their final punishment. That's a key. Remember, any court, any just court system would never give out a punishment to somebody until they've been judged, right?
Yes.
Now remember, when we studied 1844 and the cleansing of the sanctuary, the righteous are judged before the second coming. That
Yes.
began in 1844 at the end of the 2300 days when God started cleansing the temple in heaven. So the righteous are judged before the
The
second
first,
coming.
yeah.
But the wicked, they're going to get their final punishment at the end of the 1,000 years, which means they must be judged before the second death, and that happens during the 1,000 years. They have to be judged first. So we're judged before we get our reward, before the second coming. They're judged before they get their reward at during the 1,000 years. They're judged by us.
Wow.
Interesting, right?
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Because
And that's literally a
in the
thousand years,
beginning,
right?
Literally 1,000
1,000
years. That's a good
Literally
question.
A thousand
Now,
years.
You know it's literal because the way it's worded is not in any kind of cryptic
No days.
language.
Right.
It's
Yes.
not, the other one, 1,260 days, that doesn't make sense. Or time times and half a time, right? When it wants to describe years in a symbolic way, it'll use the word times. But here it doesn't. It's 1,000
straight.
years, straight, simple. It's
But
it's
a
literal.
day is like 1,000 years for God. I mean, 1,000 years is like,
like
a
a
day
day.
for God. So the seventh day is 1,000.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool?
Exactly.
Yeah, that is
Well,
so
here's another
cool.
thing. So going back to the
Yeah.
Sabbath idea,
Oh, yeah.
So
God is
there's-
perfect.
there's 6,000 years that this earth has had to deal with sin, and then 1,000-year Sabbath that the land will literally rest.
That's in
The
Peter.
land will rest. Yeah,
That's good.
Yeah.
All the toxic waste.
yeah, absolutely. So we will judge the world during the 1,000 years, and we will decide, we will come to the conclusion that God was right. So let's look at Revelation chapter 19, verse 1 and 2. And here's basically what we will say. We will look at the books, and we will agree with God. After these things, I heard a great voice of much people in heaven, saying, Hallelujah! Salvation and glory and honor and power unto the Lord our God, for true and righteous are his judgments. For he hath judged the great whore, which did corrupt the earth with her fornication, and hath avenged the blood of his servants at her hand. So we will say, true and righteous are your judgments. We're going to open the books, We're going to have our questions answered before they get their final punishment. We will judge the world. We will judge even the fallen angels.
And we will be in full
Agreement.
agreement.
Agreement,
Yes.
yes. We will see that God did everything he could. We will look, he will show us their lives, and we'll see God did everything he could to try and reach them, and they still refused.
Yeah.
And we will say, you were right.
That would be
They
like a
deserve
big
it.
movie.
Yeah.
You can see
I don't know how God's going to show their lives to us.
You will
I don't
see
know
the
how. Is
nakedness
it
of
going to
these
be,
people,
you know, like a
Jesus.
screen or something? I don't know how, but the Bible describes it in terms of books, you know? Everything's written in the
Maybe each
books.
person has a video script.
I don't
And
know.
what's great about being up there though is that we don't have to see others don't have to see our sins.
No, that's
That's
the
a
point.
good point.
Yeah.
So those
Yeah.
who are lost, everyone's going to see everything in their life.
Yes,
But those who are saved, the Bible says
It's
all our
kept-
sins are wiped out. No one
Wiped
sees
out.
it.
they will
No one
not
else
see
sees
us.
it. God is the only one who knows, and then he wipes it out, and he doesn't bring it up to you anymore. And so I would rather have my
I rather have
sins
to have
expunged,
yes,
the record
forever.
closed, and thrown into the sea, right?
I know.
Amen.
I won't be able to
And
see
there
anything,
is
huh?
a sign. of
No,
wish.
all of you gone.
I won't be able to see any of your sins. Huh?
No,
No more. In the millennium, I want to see. Nope, they're saved. You can't see it. No, all the sins are gone. Yeah. Now, at some point, go back to Revelation. Let's look at Revelation 21. At some point, at the end of the 1,000 years, God's people come back to this earth, right? Because we're going to inherit this earth.
that's right.
So at some point, it says New Jerusalem comes back down to this
That
earth.
was my next, the New
Yes.
Jerusalem.
Yes.
Where is it?
Revelation 21, verse 1 and 2. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. I'm jumping into the future here when God recreates it, so don't get confused.
Well, right before it talks about the second death in the verse.
Yeah, we're going to go back into that. So I'm jumped past the second death. I'm going into this, time here. But then it says, and I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. So at some point, New Jerusalem comes down onto this earth, comes down from heaven, and obviously with all God's people in it, because we're living in it.
And we're there inside. We finished judging.
We are in the camp in Jerusalem, right? This giant, glorious golden city comes back down to this earth. Now, that happens at some point. It's mentioned in Revelation 20, but it doesn't mention that it came back down. It's just, boom, it's just there. But Revelation 21 tells you it comes down from God. So that's why I read that verse real quick, because this is not all in chronological order. Okay, now. Oh, let me list the events in this quickly. I don't want to keep you guys too late.
No.
Okay.
This is fascinating.
If anyone needs to go, feel free. I'm going to try and end this quickly. Okay. At the second coming, SC, second coming, wicked, alive,
Which means
Are
resurrect.
Destroy.
killed,
Kill.
right?
Mhm.
The righteous, the
With
ones who are
Christ.
dead, are
Resurrected.
resurrected. The righteous, the ones who are
Alive.
alive,
Will be
are
caught.
changed.
Changed.
And both of these
Are
go up to heaven. Well, both of these
Both
groups,
are changed.
they go to heaven. Okay, that's at the second coming. During the 1,000 years, the demons are alone on this earth. Demons are alone. Can you imagine all the fallen angels that Satan tricked? They're not going to be happy with him during the 1,000 years. Look what
Frustrated.
you promised us all this stuff. Look at what we have now. Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah,
they're
they
going
will
to
realize
be
that.
beating up on him. He deserves it.
Yes, he
The
does.
earth is empty, without form and void.
So he realized that the real death is a blessing.
Yeah, it's almost, he's put out of his misery at the end of that 1,000 years. And during this 1,000 years, the saints are
Are
in
judging.
heaven judging. Okay. At the end of the 1,000 years, now this is what we're going to get into now. The end of the 1,000 years, what happens there? The wicked are then resurrected, right?
Yeah.
And the rest of the dead live not until the 1,000 years were finished. The wicked are resurrected.
Mm-hmm.
Wicked, resurrected. This is the second resurrection. And Satan is loosed from his prison to go out and deceive the nations, right?
Yeah, because he has someone
Now
to
he
deceive
has somebody to
again.
deceive, yeah? The wicked are resurrected. How many wicked? All
Like a sand.
From Cain.
who have ever existed. From
Oh,
the beginning of time,
From the
all
beginning.
of the wicked. Imagine how many
Okay.
people that's going to be.
man.
It's gonna be a lot of people.
That's going to be a
Billions and
lot of people
billions.
from all ages.
Billions of people.
Billions.
Lots of people. And then we have the great white throne judgment that you asked about. Great white throne. The wicked receive their final punishment, which is the second death, which is also called the lake of fire. Second death, lake of fire. After that, we have new heaven, new earth, and eternity. That's the good part. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's look at this.
So do you think the New Jerusalem come down before
It
the
comes down
the resurrected?
It comes down at the end of the 1,000 years. Does it come down before the wicked are resurrected? God is in there, in the New Jerusalem with them. Who resurrects them? God does. He's the only one who has the power to. So, of course, God comes down, calls the wicked up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so at some point, does the Jerusalem land first, or as they're coming down? I don't know. But at some point,
Maybe not down, just not touch the.
No, it will not touch the
even
ground
earth.
until it's clean.
I don't know. But
It says God
I
himself will be with them.
yeah, God's going to be with them. I do believe it does come down. You know, I think you're talking about a verse about Christ at the second coming. He doesn't touch the ground.
Yeah.
But the New Jerusalem does come down onto this earth.
We'll
see, we'll see.
This earth is still dirty and evil.
We'll see. Okay, so Revelation 20, starting in verse 7. Let's look at the end of the 1,000 years now. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go and deceive the nations. That was his prison. He didn't have anyone to deceive, which are in the four corners of the earth. Now, how does he have the nations to deceive again now? Because the wicked are resurrected, right? According to back in verse 4, it said, or I'm sorry, verse 5, but the rest of the dead live not again till the 1,000 years were finished. It just assumes you read that part. And so now in verse 7 it says, or verse 8 it says, and he shall go out to deceive the nations at the end of the 1,000 years. So it's assuming you understand that was the second resurrection happened. So now all the wicked are there. And Satan's loosed from his prison, which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog. What is that?
Yeah, I was gonna ask
What is Gog and Magog? This is, again, assuming that you know the Old Testament. Revelation quotes the Old Testament over and over and over again. It assumes you know it. Gog was one of the first enemies of Israel in the Old Testament when they came out of Egypt and they had to conquer different areas. Gog and the king of Gog was one of their first enemies, and they were avowed enemies of God's people.
Ezekiel 38.
What's that?
Ezekiel 38.
Ezekiel 38 talks about them too.
Yeah.
So the idea is that these are, and Gog is the enemies of God's people. Magog means the sons of Gog. So it's Gog and his children, his descendants. So the idea is nations that oppose God's people. And it's symbolic, just as
Everything.
2 chapters previous when it talks about Babylon, that's symbolic. That's not literal Babylon. It's not literal Gog and Magog. It's just enemies of God's people. And Gog and Magog are the symbol here for that. And it says, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. This is
That's
all
a
the
lot.
wicked all
That's a
over the
lot of
planet.
wicked
Just like our
people.
brother just said, billions of people. That's
Yes.
a lot.
And so Satan's rounding them together for battle.
Mhm.
Isn't that interesting? So the New Jerusalem comes down to this earth. The wicked are resurrected, and Satan says, "Let's go attack."
He just doesn't get it, does he?
Yeah,
He has not changed at all. He tries to literally attack it.
Sister.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Verse 9. And they went up on the breadth of the earth, so they're on the surface of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints. They surrounded the New Jerusalem, right? It probably looks like an impressive army, you know? Like the sand of the sea, right?
And there are so many warriors.
They encompassed the camp of the saints about, and oh yeah, warriors from all different ages. Can you imagine all these great generals from all these different ages,
Yeah, but They
right?
don't have glorified bodies.
But they're not given perfect
No.
bodies when they're resurrected.
Whenever they are
Yeah,
look
so
like that.
I don't know what kind of weapons that they come up with, but they're trying to attack God's city, the New Jerusalem.
It doesn't say here, no, but I heard that how can he deceive them? And the deception, that here, no, it's not really in the Bible, no, is that he's telling them that he resurrected them,
They don't know how they were resurrected.
No, they don't know.
They just woke up and they're here.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Maybe he does. Maybe that's one of the things he says. Hey, I resurrected you. Let's all go.
And that's the enemy there, Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Great controversy.
Okay,
But
so
that
let's.
is like sleeping time, so they're gonna think they just wake up.
They have no idea
Yes.
what
Yeah.
happened. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're right.
All they know is they're here, and this guy seems to be in charge, and he says attack. Let's all
Okay,
go,
let's
right?
go.
Maybe he disguises himself as Jesus.
I don't know.
Maybe he can do that, right?
And say that's the enemy in New Jerusalem. I don't know. But somehow he deceives them, it
But
says.
the certain people saw Jesus' second coming when
Oh.
Jesus.
That's true, that's
when
true.
People died.
Somehow he deceives them. Okay. So they compass the camp of the saints about, verse 9, and the beloved city, and fire comes down from God out of heaven and devours them. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone. You can imagine that the wicked covering this earth like the sand of the sea, and they're all set on fire, it looks like a lake of fire.
Shakadoodle.
Yeah, and the fire devours them. Where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented, notice this, day and night, forever and ever. We're going to come back to that in a second, because people have questions about that, right? We'll come back to that in 1 second. We'll study that tonight. And I saw a great white throne, and him that sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heavens fled away, and there was found no place for them. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books, according to their works. And the sea gave up the dead that were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead that were in them. Now again, the word hell there is simply Hades. It just means
Hell.
the grave. That's it, yeah.
Right.
And the sea gave up, death gave up them that lived in. Of course, this is symbolic. Death gave up them that were in them. Death is not a place, And were judged every man according to their works. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is obviously symbolic. Death isn't a thing that you put into the lake of fire. It means this is the end of death. Death doesn't exist anymore, right? Right, when Paul says, "Oh, death, where is thy sting?" Death will be swallowed up in victory.
Yes.
It's symbolic. It means there's no more death anymore after this. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And whosoever was not found in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. So, the devil, as soon as the wicked are resurrected at the end of the 1,000 years, God's people come back down onto this earth in the New Jerusalem. The devil convinces them to attack the holy city, but they don't make it very far. Fire comes down from heaven, and God devours them. And it looks like a lake of fire over this whole earth, and it's called the second death. The devil is burned up, the false prophet, all of them. It says that they are devoured. Now, people have a question. They say, but wait, Joshua, verse 10 says that they were tormented day and night, forever and ever. Does that mean for all eternity? Right?
Yes.
No.
Let's look.
Verse
And
11.
we'll end with this here.
I think verse 11, right? Answer the question. At the end.
Well, let's look. Let me look at these verses here.
Okay.
Deuteronomy chapter 15. Well, there should be some common sense here, because we know, first of all, they're on the face of the earth,
Mm-hmm.
on fire, right? But the Bible says that we inherit the earth. So how is it that they stay on the face of the earth, burning for all eternity, but we live here too? And it's paradise? You can't have both at the same
And
time.
by the way, and also the great white throne, where is it? It will be burned too if it is on the earth.
There's lots of problems with this idea that
Yeah.
they stay here burning forever. So let's look and see. There's multiple, and I'm just going to give you a few times. There's multiple examples in the Bible where the word forever can simply mean a long period of time, not necessarily all eternity. It depends on the context. Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 12. This is speaking of a slave, and a slave who decides, because if you were a Hebrew slave and you sold yourself because you were poor, you were set free at the end of 6 years. On the 7th year, you were set free. But if you did not want to be set free, if you liked your job as a slave, you could stay. So here's the wording. Deuteronomy 15, verse 12. If thy brother, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, be sold unto thee, and shall serve thee 6 years, then in the 7th year you shall set him free. Thou shalt let him go free from thee. Don't send him out empty. Go to verse 16. And it shall be, if he says unto thee, I will not go away from thee, because he loveth thee in thine house, because he is well with thee. Verse 17. Then thou shalt take an awl, an instrument that has a point on it. You shall take an awl and thrust it through his ear unto the door. So you pierce his ear. And he shall be thy servant forever. And also unto thy maidservant thou shalt do likewise. Now, does that mean...
You have to go.
That's okay. That's
We'll
okay.
even put the Portland.
Oh, I understand. That's okay. Good night. Good night. We're almost done. You guys have a good night. That's okay. No problem. So the word there used is forever. But is that literal? Do you become then that person's slave for all of eternity? Well, question, are these Hebrew people, are they slaves right now?
Yes.
Well, the ones who lived these thousands of years ago?
I'm sorry.
Where are they right now?
Dead.
They're asleep, right? Are they going to be slaves in heaven?
No.
No, they're not going to be slaves in heaven. The idea, the forever, it means until they're dead, you know, and until the end of this life, they're not going to be slaves in heaven. And they're not slaves right now, they're dead. That's the idea. Do you get the point?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to give you another example. It's the same one. Same idea. Exodus 21. So the word, and you can look up the word, it could mean simply for a long period of time. It doesn't necessarily mean for eternity. Exodus 21, verse 2. If you buy a Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve thee. Let me switch to New King James here. Get rid of the these and thous. 6 years he will serve you. Now it's frozen on me. Oh, here we go.
Verse 6.
And in the 7th year he shall go out free. Verse 5. But if the servant plainly says, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free. Then his master shall bring him to the judges. He will also bring him to the door or to the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. Is that literal?
No.
No.
Until his death.
Until his death. That's the idea. Forever could mean until the death. You get the point? Okay. 1 Samuel chapter 1. We're almost done. 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 22. You know the story of Samuel's birth?
Mm-hmm.
He was a miracle child, right? From his mother Hannah. And she prayed, Lord, give me a child and I will give him back to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Eli thought she was drunk when she was praying. Her mouth was moving. Right? What are you doing drinking in the temple? No, I'm praying. And God answered her prayer because she couldn't have children before, and then the Lord gave her Samuel. And so she decided to keep her word. She was going to give the child back to the Lord. Verse 22, so her husband is going to go up to the yearly sacrifice, verse 22, in Jerusalem. But Hannah did not go up, for she said to her husband, not until the child is weaned. Then I will take him, that he may appear before the Lord and remain there forever. And that's what she did. When the child was weaned, she took him to Jerusalem, to the temple. She gave him to the priests, and she says, he's yours. He lives in the temple now. That's what happened to Samuel. He was raised in the temple. Did he live in the temple forever? Literally, according to our idea of what forever means? No. Is he in the temple today? No, he's buried. He's in a grave. He's not in the temple forever. That's the idea. It's a figure of speech. It depends on the context, right? The Bible often does this. So, when you say I was in line at the DMV, it felt like I was there forever. The Bible uses figurative language sometimes, and you need to read the context. If the context is describing Jesus on the throne forever, then yeah. But if it's describing something like Samuel living in the temple forever, obviously no. It just means he's supposed to be there until he dies, right? That's the idea. One last one. Jonah chapter 2, verse 6. Everyone who knows the Bible knows this story. How long was Jonah in the belly of the beast?
3 days.
3 days and 3 nights, right? What did Jonah say? Jonah chapter 2, verse 6, he's describing himself. You can look at verse 5. The waters surrounded me even into my soul. The deep closed around me. Weeds wrapped around my head. I went down to the moorings of the mountains, verse 6. The earth with its bars closed behind me forever. Is that literal?
No.
No. Was Jonah literally in the whale forever?